Welcome to Wesley Impact. This is the television program of Wesley Mission, where we share our work with you and invite you to see parts of our community services and our congregational life firsthand. Later today, I'll continue my message that was filmed at our Easter breakfast earlier this year, looking at how Jesus interacted with four of his disciples, John, Judas, Thomas, and Peter. I'll be expanding on what we can learn from all of their interactions they had with Jesus. Now, if you're not able to join us last week, I'd like to encourage you to visit the Wesley Mission website, see the first part of my interview with John Dickson. John is a university lecturer, public speaker, author, media personality, visionary, and advocate for the Christian faith. He also happens to be a great friend. He's had a career that spans over 30 years in music, academia, apologetics, the media, and much more. I'm so pleased that John is with me again in the studio today to continue the conversation. Welcome, John.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Great to have you with us. Now, you've authored more than 20 books. You've also been a part of putting together some fabulous documentary series, being key presenters in those and producers of those. Tell us how that came about.
Well, I mean, it really flows out of books I've written and talks I've given. You just think, how can you give flesh to these arguments? And so a documentary is a wonderful way for people not just to read an argument in a book, but to see it, to go to the places, to see where stuff happened. It helps the imagination. And this is the thing I love about history anyway. It's such it ignites the imagination so much because you've got to imagine different cultures and places and people. And that's what the documentaries are trying to do.
You've served as an Anglican priest at Roseville for many years, and you also founded Centre for Public Christianity. What was the genesis of that?
Yeah, one of the proudest things of my life was starting the centre. My whole sort of life theme is trying to make Christ public. And everything I've done, music or academia or write or whatever, it is just trying to make Christ public. And so the idea of a centre for public Christianity just seemed like a golden opportunity. And we had some really important sponsors when we started it back in 2007. And so we were able to sort of bring our vision to life almost immediately. And our vision was to bring to a skeptical world a vision of Christianity that is thoughtful, compassionate, and practical.
So you saw a gap, you saw a need.
There was a real gap. And we were a bunch of scholar communicators who always had this vision to do it. And so to be given the resources to do it, yes, we just sort of fit into that gap. And I no longer work there. I worked there for 10 years, but they continue to do extraordinary work.
And what were some of the topics, the themes that you were picking up in those early years that you particularly struck a chord?
Well, in those early years, the new atheism was still new. I mean, now...
It's stale atheism.
A lot of people find it stale, including some of the most thoughtful atheists in the world just are embarrassed by that whole movement. But in 2007, everyone was reading Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris. And so their arguments against the faith, science has disproved God, Christianity's just done damage in history, etc. Those arguments were all the rage, and so we spent a lot of time trying to interact with those arguments and offer a hopefully more thoughtful perspective. And I think we had some success. We certainly were invited into the media a lot in those days.
John, in 2018, we produced For the Love of God, this incredible exploration of the Christian faith and the history of the Christian faith. What drove that?
It became increasingly clear to us that people's main problem with Christianity wasn't that science had disproved God, wasn't even the question of suffering and so on, even though those questions are real. It is the fear, the suspicion that the church is just bad for society. It harms the vulnerable. You give Christianity a bit of power and it'll start a crusade. Like that mentality is so current that we felt we had to write and research and then eventually produce this documentary. That's 4 episodes. It deals with everything from the Crusades to the Inquisitions, the Northern Ireland conflict, but also shows that from the beginning there's been this beautiful tune that Jesus himself wrote. It's love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Something he took all the way to his cross, where he died for the sins of the world, right? And then called on his followers to give themselves, even for their enemies. And so you can see that thread as well weave its way through all of church history. And the documentary tries to capture both. It doesn't hide the bad, but it tries to point people to the beautiful tune that Christians have sung well at different times in history, and sometimes out of tune as well.
Well, let's have a look at a particularly powerful moment in that series now. Let's look at the screen.
Jerusalem, home of three great religions, the so-called City of Peace. In the blistering heat of July 15th, 1099, 10,000 European crusaders broke through Jerusalem's walls and fought their way up here to one of Islam's most sacred sites and committed one of the great atrocities of Christian history. Thousands barricaded themselves in up here and sought refuge in the mosque. Some even climbed the roof of the mosque to escape. But the Crusaders burst through and slaughtered men, women, and children. Some they threw off the high walls to their deaths. The rest they butchered. The carnage apparently filled this great promenade. When the fighting was done, the pilgrims, as they like to call themselves, marched 500 metres that way to the ancient Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they held a Thanksgiving service. The irony is scorching. Near this church, a millennium earlier, Jesus of Nazareth had died on a Roman cross, having called his followers to love their enemies. I hardly know what to say.
So, John, this was filmed around the world.
It was great fun, yeah.
Back when we could travel.
Yeah, those were the days. I can't remember how many countries, but a lot. And the three of us who present the documentary just had a wonderful time, being in the places where all this stuff happened, including a place like Jerusalem in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where some of the most terrible things happened.
Now, you mentioned before about the tune that Jesus offered us. And this is a theme you pick up in Bullies and Saints, your most recent book as well. And so there's a real connection between that documentary series, this book. In the book, you had this wonderful metaphor about a piece of cello music that you as a rock star musician attempted to play. Can you share with us about that metaphor?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you just Google or go onto Spotify or whatever, Bach's cello suites, Prelude, you'll hear one of the most magical pieces of music ever put together. And I just use this as an analogy of Christ's impact in the world. Was the most beautiful tune. And Christians have sometimes played it well, and sometimes not so well. And yes, I have attempted to play it. I had 2 cello lessons, and 1 week, and then the next week
tried. You're an expert by the time.
So I can play the first 4 bars, but not very well.
It goes downhill after that.
But of course, you wouldn't judge the composition on the basis of my terrible performance, right? You know to actually hear it how it's meant to be played, and of course to dismiss Christianity because of the poor performance of some Christians isn't wise. You want to really hear the melody. So look for Christians who are living like what Jesus taught, and then you'll hear the beautiful tune.
We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to talk more about your podcast series, which is wildly, spectacularly successful, Undeceptions, and again, what you're trying to do with that and what that's trying to communicate. We'll be back in just a moment.
If you would like to learn more about Wesley Mission, visit wesleymission.org.au. You can find help in our community services, connect with our church and congregations, discover a volunteer role that suits you, stay up to date on the latest news and information, donate to support our work, and help make a positive difference in your community. You can also connect with us on social media and subscribe to receive the latest news and information about Wesley Mission directly into your inbox. Visit wesleymission.org.au.
Do be in touch with us if we can be of help to you, a family member or a friend in any way. Our doors are always open and we're ready to lend a hand however we can. My guest in the studio is university lecturer, public speaker, author, media personality, visionary and advocate for the Christian faith, John Dickson. John, it's always so good to have you on the program.
Thanks,
and
Stu.
You have such a rich academic life. You're a visiting fellow with Oxford University in the UK, involved with Ridley here in Australia, also with the University of Sydney. How does that academic life, how does that bleed into your media work? How do they feed each other?
Well, they are all one thing. They are all because I really want to make Christ public. So my visiting academic at the Classics Department in Oxford is I'm doing a research project on education in the ancient world and how the early Christians educated people in the faith. And my teaching at Sydney is I teach a course on the life of Jesus. It's a history course, it's not a theology course. But again, it's just trying to make Christianity where it should be, part of the public conversation. So for me, there is no jarring between sort of public media, sort of popular explanation and the academic stuff. Because I want to be able to present a vision of Christianity that is informed by the best scholarship. That's crucial. I don't want to sound like a nerd, but I want to be a nerd.
Yeah, a nerd that communicates well.
Hopefully.
Yeah. John, I remember having a conversation with you a few years ago and you were talking about launching a new podcast, and you did, Undeceptions, and it has struck a chord, both here in Australia but around the world. What's the vision behind that, Undeceptions?
Yeah, I mean, to undeceive someone is just to tell them the truth. And that's what I'm trying to do in Undeceptions. There are so many myths about the Christian faith out there, and each episode we take on some issue. It might be about ethics or history or philosophy or science, and we talk to experts, and I do some editorial, and we try and undeceive people. And yeah, it seems to have struck a chord. I mean, way more than I thought it would. And we're just finished our 4th season, about to start our 5th season. And it's very exciting. It's now a huge part of what I do from week to week.
Yeah, and a huge audience that you're reaching with it. It's so beautifully produced.
Thank you.
What are some of the topics, the memorable topics, for you at least anyway, that you've tackled?
Wow, where to begin?
The standouts.
Well, I mean, one of the first episodes was me in the University of Michigan papyrology department handling the oldest fragments of Paul's letters. And we've recorded the whole thing of me, you know, into the vault where they're collected, playing with, you know, these ancient copy of Paul's letters. We've interviewed scientists from around the world. Each episode, we're just trying to take something that people maybe misunderstand about the Christian faith and let the truth out.
I think it'd be great for our viewers to actually get a taste, if they haven't done so already, of Undeception. So we're going to listen to a clip right now.
This is our earliest copy of Paul's letters to Rome, Ephesus, Galatia, and his second letter to Corinth. Each page, just so you can picture it, is about half an A4, or for US listeners, letter style. And it's got like 23 to 26 lines per page, just depending on what the scribe wants to do at the time. And it's all on papyrus, and we get the word paper from papyrus. This is strips of papyrus plant laid in vertical lines, and then you get a second layer and cross it horizontally, and then you press the whole...
John, you sound like a kid in a candy store there.
I have to pinch myself sometimes.
Yeah, the amazing opportunities you've had. Yeah. I mean, one of the amazing opportunities you've had in recent times, I have to say I was a little jealous. You had an opportunity to speak with a really well-known and renowned historian, Tom Holland, who's written a fabulous book called Dominion. And he's reading it not from a place of faith, but having an objective look again at world history and the influence of Christianity across it. Talk to us about that.
He is probably the biggest selling historian in the world. But about 5 or 6 years ago, he admitted it had just dawned on him, as a complete, intellectual, secular man, it had just dawned on him that the values he loves as a modern Westerner, like charity for all, human rights, humility, compassion, etc., cannot have come from Greece or Rome, the other two great cultures that influence the West. They can only have come from Christianity. It was a big aha moment for him. And he published an essay at the time, 5-6 years ago, saying, I was completely wrong about Christianity. So yes, he was someone I've loved. I've been in contact with him before the interview. So to actually get him for an hour was unbelievable. It was perhaps my favourite interview of all 4 seasons. And he basically thinks the cross of Jesus Christ changed the Western world. That the immense, powerful God went to a cross for us, changed what greatness means. It changed how valuable we are. It changed how you view the most weak and vulnerable. It upended the entire social program. And to hear someone who's not a Christian say that is really impressive. And of course, toward the end of the interview, I was able to ask him, so, why don't you become a Christian? I plucked up the courage. And, people can listen to it for themselves, but he as good as said, you know what? I'm on a journey. I'm on a journey.
What marks your work in Undeceptions and across the books you've written, the series you've produced, is a rich intellectual honesty, rigorous intellectual honesty. You present the positives, you present the negatives about Christian faith and how it's been lived out by followers of Jesus since his time. Why is that so important, do you think?
Evidence. It's got to be based on evidence. And so much of our world is just based on emotion or propaganda or rhetoric. If you can say
Tribalism.
Tribalism. But evidence is really what matters. And our faith is an evidence-based faith. It's about testimony that was written down in the 1st century that can be analysed all these years later. Let the evidence lead people. Don't think tribally. Don't speak tribally. Speak graciously and let the weight of the evidence move people.
Scriptures, Jesus himself says that we should love God with all our heart, soul, mind and strength. What does it look like to love God with our minds?
I think it means not allowing yourself to be carried away by the emotions and my tribe and sticking up for my position, but actually listening to people who disagree. Apply your mind to people's criticisms. As a Christian, I want to hear why people don't believe, and I want to then work out whether those reasons are sound or not. The Christian faith is very bookish. That's another thing to say. It is a book. It's based on a book. We take that for granted, but it's kind of weird. And it's also based on biographies. Those 4 Gospels, which were really the beginning of my own Christian journey, are actually where Christians should be focused. Because studying the teaching of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus is really what will keep us singing the beautiful tune of Jesus.
Yeah, fantastic. John, thanks so much for joining us, not just this week, but last week as well. I want to commend all of John's work to you, the books he's written, particularly Bullies and Saints, which is just a wonderful read. John, may God continue to bless you in your work, may it be fruitful and effective, and look forward to all that you'll produce into the future.
Thanks, mate.
I'll be back in just a moment.
I think people are amazing. We can turn dark to light. We can fly through storms. We can change worlds, but we can't always do it alone. If you need help, we could work together. Find out more at wesleymission.org.au. We are here for you.
Get in touch with us if Wesley Mission can help you, a friend or a family member in any way. We are here for you. We're part way through a message looking at how Jesus interacted with his disciples, John, Judas, Thomas and Peter. Today I'll focus on Thomas and then Peter. But first, I start by drawing a picture of God's love for us all. Here's the thing I love about the God who we celebrate this Easter. He doesn't reject doubters. He welcomes them. Jesus is not repelled by our doubts. He's drawn by them. And so if you find yourself in a place of doubt or skepticism, why not risk bringing your doubts to him? As Tim Keller puts it, why not doubt your doubts? Why not doubt your doubts? And so we have Judas the enemy,
Thomas the doubter, we have John the insecure, and finally my favourite, Peter the failure. Peter makes a bold declaration at this table. Jesus, of course, I'm ready to die for you. I'm ready to stand for you. I'm ready to be authentic for you. I'm ready to be there for you. And Jesus, Peter, before the night's out, you'll deny me 3 times. And of course, tragically, that unfolds, and Peter is left with the bitterness of his failure. And when I see this table, perhaps what's most striking to me of all is that Jesus welcomes failures like me. People who make mistake after mistake like me. People welcomes the spectacular failures, the mediocre failures, all of us. And the reality of failure is that it can crush hope from us and steal our joy. But the good news that's depicted in this table is that Jesus welcomes failures into his presence. And his death and resurrection unshackles and forever frees us from the power of failure. You know, one of the things that it's a privilege and joy to be an ordained minister in the Uniting Church is that over the last couple of decades, I've had the privilege of conducting a number of weddings. I love a good wedding. Who loves a good wedding? I love a good wedding. And one of the things I love about weddings, particularly after the ceremony is over, is the reception, of course, the party to celebrate the bride and the groom. And you would be familiar with this custom. What happens when at a reception, a wedding reception, when people will pick up their glass and when they will tink it with a piece of cutlery? What does that depict? What is that signalling? Speech is coming. It's also time to kiss. It's time to kiss. We're the true romantics in this room. It's time to kiss. And of course, this plays out in weddings across our culture. There's a different custom in other cultures. In Russian culture to this day, people won't clink glasses. What they will do is they'll raise a glass and they'll say to the bride and groom, "Gorko, gorko," which translated from Russian means bitter, bitter. And the custom is that it's time for the bride and the groom to kiss, because the custom and the customary belief is that as they kiss, the bitter wine will become sweet again. Here's the good news that we celebrate this week. On the cross, Jesus tasted the cup of bitterness, the bitterness of our failure, in order that we might experience his joy. My friends, that is good news. That is the best of news. And so Jesus welcomes to his table the insecure, the enemy, the doubter, the failure. All of them are welcome at his table. And here's the great news. All has no asterisks. All means all. All means all.
As we see in the story of the Last Supper and the way Jesus interacted with John, with Judas, with Thomas and Peter, you and I are welcome at his table. We are all, inclusive of everyone, welcome to come to Jesus. His arms are open wide and ready to greet us. My team and I at Wesley Mission would love the opportunity to answer any questions you might have about the Christian faith or about Jesus, and if you'd like, to introduce you to him. If that's of interest, please don't hesitate to be in touch, and we'll be sure to get in touch with you. I hope to hear from you. I'll be back in just a moment.
I think people are amazing. We can turn dark to light. We can fly through storms. We can change worlds, but we can't always do it alone. If you need help, we could work together. Find out more at wesleymission.org.au. We are here for you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation with John Dickson over the last couple of weeks as much as I have. John is certainly helping to lead the way in promoting a greater understanding of religion and the role the Christian faith has played in helping to shape our world today. You can watch this episode and also catch up on last week's interview with John on the Wesley Mission website. While you're online, you can also be in touch if we can be of help to you, a family member or a friend in any way. Our doors are always open, and we're prepared to roll up our sleeves and lend a helping hand wherever we can. I'll be back at the same time, the same place next week. I hope you can join me then. Every blessing to you and those you love.
Wesley Mission walks alongside people of all ages struggling with homelessness, addictions, mental health issues and financial stress. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.